He had just 30 seconds to decide. 30 seconds in which he had to choose between telling his superiors that the United States had launched nuclear missiles toward the Soviet Union, or declaring that the early warning system was wrong. 30 seconds that separated humanity from the most devastating war in history. 30 seconds in which alarms flashed red, screens filled with warnings, and every man in the Soviet bunker turned toward one person, Stanislav Petrov, a man whose name almost nobody knew, whose job nearly nobody understood, but whose decision would determine the fate of the entire world. The world in 1983 was a pressure cooker of paranoia and mistrust. The Cold War had dragged on for decades. Crises had come and gone. Berlin, Cuba, Afghanistan, countless proxy wars. But tensions had never truly faded. Instead, they simmered beneath the surface, waiting for a spark. Politicians exchanged accusations. Generals spoke of acceptable losses. Civilians stocked bunkers and imagined mushroom clouds in the distance. The two superpowers built larger and more destructive arsenals, each trying to outpace the other, each prepared to unleash hell at a moment's notice. The Soviet Union believed the United States was preparing for an attack. The United States believed the Soviet Union was preparing for an attack. Every radar blip, every satellite anomaly, every unexpected communication blackout could trigger panic. Mistakes, malfunctions, and misunderstandings were as dangerous as deliberate aggression. This was the world Stanislav Petrov inhabited, a world where technology malfunctioned, governments mistrusted each other, and one wrong calculation could erase human civilization in an afternoon. Inside the secret facility known as Serpukhov 15, Petrov and his colleagues worked deep underground. The bunker had thick reinforced walls, narrow hallways, and harsh fluorescent lights that made everything look pale and artificial. There were no windows, no sense of time. Days blended into nights. People lived by the rhythm of the machines, the soft hum of computers, the blinking of lights, the steady flow of information from orbiting satellites. In this claustrophobic environment, you had one responsibility: monitor the skies for the start of Armageddon. Petrov wasn't just any officer. He was thoughtful, calm, analytical. He didn't crave power or recognition. He wasn't easily intimidated or impressed by rank. He had studied engineering, understood how computers could fail, and believed that even the most advanced systems could be flawed. These traits made him uniquely suited for the role he held that night, and they made him uniquely capable of saving the world. Shortly after midnight, the room was quiet. Officers monitored their screens. Some drank tea. Others scribbled notes. Petrov listened to the steady beeping of equipment he trusted only partially. He had seen glitches before: false positives, calibration errors, mistaken readings. But nothing could prepare him for what happened next. The first alarm hit like a punch to the chest. A blaring siren echoed through the bunker, followed by bright red text flashing across multiple screens. The computer system reported a single nuclear missile had just been launched from the United States. According to the algorithm, it was headed directly toward the Soviet Union. It was not a drill. It was not a test. It was not a simulation. For a moment, the room froze. Officers stared at the warning, almost unable to breathe. Some rushed to their stations, others waited for Petrov's reaction. He scanned the data quickly: coordinates, trajectory, estimated time to impact. Everything looked terrifyingly real. He could feel the tension rising as people whispered to each other, their voices shaking. Before Petrov could process the first alert, the alarm sounded again, and again, and again, and again. The system now reported 5 missiles, launched one after another, heading toward strategic targets. 5 nuclear missiles, capable of wiping out cities, military bases, and millions of lives. The pressure inside the bunker became unbearable. Junior officers looked pale. One man clutched his headset as if holding onto a lifeline. Another stood rigid, eyes fixed on Petrov. This wasn't just a bad situation. It was the nightmare everyone had feared for decades. The nightmare that doctors, teachers, farmers, children, politicians, everyone had imagined in their darkest thoughts. Protocol said Petrov must classify the alert as real. He must notify Soviet leadership. They would move to the highest level of readiness. They would prepare for counterattack. And if the political leadership believed the United States had attacked first, they would launch every warhead they had in retaliation. Petrov knew what that meant. Hundreds of American cities, towns, and bases obliterated. Within minutes, the United States would retaliate in full, targeting millions of civilians in the Soviet Union. Europe would be annihilated. Asia would be engulfed. The nuclear winter that followed could erase life on Earth entirely. He knew all of this. He had studied the consequences. He had imagined the scars on the planet, the burned landscapes, the ash-filled sky. The death tolls would not be measured in thousands or millions, but in continents. But something bothered him. Something felt wrong. 5 missiles, only 5. The United States, if it ever decided to strike first, would not send 5 missiles. They would send hundreds, thousands. A first strike needed to be overwhelming, aimed at eliminating the enemy's ability to respond. 5 missiles couldn't do that. 5 missiles made no military sense. Petrov felt his heart pounding, but he forced himself to think clearly. He checked ground radar again. No confirmation. He checked secondary systems. No confirmation. He asked for verification from human observers. Nothing. The only system reporting an attack was the satellite early warning system, a system that was new, untested, and known to have issues. The officers around him began to panic. Some urged him to follow protocol. Others prayed silently. One man, barely older than a teenager, asked, "What do we do?" Petrov didn't answer immediately. He understood the weight of the moment too deeply. The wrong decision meant unimaginable devastation. He remembered something his instructors had told him years earlier. Never rely on a single source of data for a nuclear decision. And yet, that was exactly what the system demanded. Complete trust in a machine that lacked human judgment. He asked himself a simple question. If this were a real attack, would it look like this? And the answer that formed inside his mind was clear. No, something was wrong. He took a breath, then another. He felt something rare, a moment of calm in the middle of chaos. He realized that despite the fear, despite the alarms, despite the pressure, the decision he had to make was simple. He picked up the phone to contact Soviet High Command. And he said the words that saved the world. "It is a false alarm." The room went silent. Some officers stared at him in disbelief, expecting the radar to light up with confirmation of incoming warheads. Others looked relieved, though they didn't dare say it. A few looked at him with fear, as if wondering whether he had just doomed them all. Minutes crawled by. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3 minutes. No explosions. No seismic shocks. No flashes of light. No radar confirmations. The Earth remained quiet. Finally, it became obvious. There were no missiles. No attack. The system had malfunctioned. The satellites had misread the reflection of sunlight off clouds high above the United States and interpreted it as missile launches. A coincidence so rare that it had never been predicted. A freak error in the machinery designed to protect the nation. Petrov had been right. But his reward was not praise. It was suspicion, interrogation, criticism. His superiors accused him of improper documentation. They blamed him for deviating from protocol. They avoided admitting the system had failed. After all, if a single officer could override a nuclear alert, what confidence did that give the Soviet High Command? Petrov's career effectively ended. He was pushed aside, denied recognition, and left with psychological scars. The pressure of that night never fully left him. He developed health issues. His wife died. He struggled for years with guilt and isolation. No one thanked him. Few even remembered him. The truth remained secret for 15 years. When the story finally emerged in 1998, journalists were stunned. So were historians, scientists, military experts, and ordinary people who realized how close the world had come to destruction. Without anyone knowing, Petrov eventually received international recognition. Awards came from peace organizations, universities, and scientists. But he accepted them with humility and often discomfort. He said he didn't feel like a hero. He said he simply followed his instincts. He said anyone else would have done the same. But history tells a different story. Not everyone stays calm in the face of chaos. Not everyone chooses reason over fear. Not everyone questions the machine when protocol demands obedience. Not everyone takes responsibility for the future of humanity. Most people placed in that bunker would have followed orders. He didn't. He chose humanity over protocol. He chose caution over panic. He chose to trust his judgment over a machine's warning. And because of that choice, billions of people lived. Cities continued to stand. Futures continued to unfold. Children were born. Families grew. Entire generations exist only because Stanislav Petrov paused, breathed, thought, and said, "No, this doesn't make sense." He died in 2017 in a small apartment, living quietly, known only to a few. But his legacy is immeasurable. He prevented a nuclear war that would have changed the history of Earth forever. He proved that the decisions that shape the world are not always made in grand halls or by famous leaders. Sometimes they are made by quiet men in dark rooms who choose to think rather than react. Stanislav Petrov may never be a household name. Most people will never know the sound of the alarm he heard, the pressure he felt, or the weight he carried. But every person alive today is part of the world he saved. He will be remembered not as a soldier, not as a strategist, but as a man who, in the most terrifying moment imaginable, trusted his humanity over fear and saved the world by doing nothing.